Hi friends, it's Mark and welcome back to No Book Left Behind, and today I'll be discussing two more examples of Lost World literature, The Moon Pool by A. Merritt and Vampires of the Andes by Henry Carew. Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel, and today I'll be reviewing a couple of examples of Lost World literature. Now, if you follow the channel, you'll know I love a bit of Lost World literature, but I haven't really found any good examples to share with you yet. So will today's two buck the trend? Will I have found a gem that I can recommend to you? Or not? Let's see. And the first book, you may have already seen me talk about this on one of my reading roundups, but this is Vampires of the Andes by Henry Carew, which was originally published in 1925. Now, the plot of this one follows English archaeologist Will Wootton, who's made a wonderful, if slightly puzzling, discovery in the jungles of Peru. Now, this is a large stone inscribed with various strange symbols. He can't read them, so he sends the stone back to England and his old professor, Humphrey Sanderson, who he hopes will be able to do the job for him. On a personal note, Wootton is about to get married. He's about to marry Quita, the beautiful young adopted daughter of the wealthy Peruvian aristocratic Del Puego family. Unfortunately, there are a couple of things that Will doesn't know about. The first one is that this stone that he's discovered is a sacred object, and it's particularly sacred to an ancient secret society descended from Atlanteans who are still very much active today and are run by a very wealthy newspaper owner and editor, and they will do anything to get the artifact returned. Secondly, Quita is not all she appears to be. She's actually the last Inca princess, and she's due to be sacrificed by this secret society as part of their once every 1,000 years ceremony to resurrect their gods, the vampires of the title. Now, given that title and the plot summary I've just given you, my expectation was that this was going to be a whole lot of fun. A breezy, maybe slightly corny slice of comic book pulp that I would breeze through quickly and really get a good time out of. Instead, this is a very serious-minded novel indeed, with a dense, overstuffed plot featuring a multitude of characters. In fact, it's not the kind of book you can put down and leave for a couple of days and then pick up again, because you may have lost track of who's who and exactly what's going on. It's also clear that Carew spent either a great deal of time in Peru or he did a copious amount of research into the country, because there's a huge amount of detail on the culture, the customs, the indigenous peoples, their languages, and the folklore and mythology, which is particularly relevant to the story. Now, I'm inclined to believe that Carew knew the country firsthand, because this extra information isn't just dropped in chunks like he's copied it out of an encyclopedia or something, but it's actually grows organically out of the dialogue and what happens in the tale. So that is all quite impressive. However, I felt that the novel really jumped the shark in the final third. The tale is told in the third person, but initially from Will Wootton's point of view, before switching quite frequently to Professor Sanderson. So it makes perfect sense when these two protagonists meet up with a colleague of Sanderson's and go into the jungle and search the caves for Quita, who has now been kidnapped. This being the same location where Wootton originally discovered the sacred stone. And this is obviously fine. Now, I'm about to head into minor spoiler territory here, so if you're intending to read the book, perhaps you should skip ahead to the timestamp indicated. When the trio bed down for the night in the caves, Wootton is the guy who's on watch, and he gets a surprise visit from Quita's real father. And he tells Will that he must leave the professors behind and continue his search for her alone. And then he opens a magic door in the wall of the cave for Will to walk through, because Quita's father, well, is he a spirit? Is he a kind of mythological being? A demigod? I'm not really sure, to be honest. But there's more to come. On Will's journey through the caves, he runs across a woman who's just sitting there on a rock waiting for him. And she reveals herself to be, a divine being, a goddess, a fallen angel of some kind. I'm not really sure about her identity either, but she offers Will a choice. He can either carry on with his search for Quita, which will involve unimaginable hardships, or he can accept the knowledge that she offers, which is nothing less than the secrets of the entire universe. And that'll enable him to solve all humanity's problems. In the very next scene, we have the secret society of Atlanteans having one of their meetings, when they're joined by a large multicoloured sacred bird who wants to pass the time of day. Now, it's fair to say that the book up to this point has hinted pretty broadly at some of these mythological or fantastical elements, but when they arrive, it just seems so sudden and so far out of left field that it is completely disorientating, and any semblance of a grounded story is completely lost. The remainder of the book leans into this metaphysical stuff so hard that I felt it just tumbled headfirst into some kind of pompous, self-important, unintentional comedy, really, and not in a fun way. Your mileage for all this esoteric kind of stuff may vary, of course, but as someone who is quite into folklore and mythology, I would have thought that I was the kind of audience who would be willing to give these developments more leeway than most. To say not much is known about author Carew is an understatement. I think the only facts that are known is that he was English and that he published one other work, a previous novel called Secrets of the Sphinx, which was about a utopian society living under the Sahara Desert. I came across a couple of statements online during my research specifically that said no one knows anything about him. Now, this is a book with so much detail and plot that it demanded my best attention as part of the reading experience, but it's fair to say that by the end I felt pretty cheated. So, moving quickly on to the second book that's under consideration today, we've got The Moon Pool by A. Merritt, which was originally published as two longish short stories in 1918 and then combined by the author into this one novel a year later. And the plot of this one concerns world-renowned botanist Walter T. Goodwin, who is sailing to Melbourne after a trip into the South Seas when he meets an old colleague, David Throckmorton. Goodwin is surprised to see him because Throckmorton recently left on an expedition to explore the ruins off the eastern coast of Pohnpei in the Carolina Islands. Pohnpei. Apologies for the pronunciation. It's in Micronesia, if you want to look it up. Throckmorton tells Goodwin an incredible story. Apparently his wife and two colleagues have been kidnapped, taken by an entity called the Dweller. Given his unusual condition and slightly strange behaviour, Goodwin is sceptical at first, until Throckmorton himself is snatched off the ship by the very creature he was talking about. And Goodwin sets up an expedition to visit Nan Madol and solve the mystery. On the way, the expedition runs across Olaf Huldrickson, a sea captain who claims that his wife and young daughter were kidnapped in exactly the same way as Throckmorton's party. They also run into Larry O'Keefe, an Irish-American pilot who is sitting on the wreckage of his hydroplane which has come down in the sea, and both these newcomers are happy to accompany the party on their expedition. Reaching the islands, they come across this great door, which Throckmorton mentioned was the gateway to the moon pool and the key to the secrets that they need to unlock and the mystery that they need to solve. Now, what I've described here is the first quarter of Merritt's novel, and up to this point I was enjoying it thoroughly. The location, these small artificial islands where the buildings now lie in ruins, was a compelling location, and it's real. It's a real place, and I would dearly love to visit it. And Merritt uses it expertly, layering on a very creepy atmosphere, courtesy of some unseen natives who sing these strange songs in the night. I was really anticipating buying a lot more of Merritt's work just from these pages alone. And then they go through the door, discover the moon pool and the great subterranean land of Muria beyond. And everything falls flatter than a pancake. One that's gone out of date and has started to smell pretty bad. Now, it's fair to say this book does have its advocates. I'm just not one of them. I mean, it has been cited as an important influence on the work of H.P. Lovecraft. And I'll touch a little more on that later, but I found this a real slog to get through in the end. For me, the problems begin when they're travelling through the passageways beyond the moon pool to get to the land of Muria. They're confronted by an apparition, and this is the girl with the golden eyes, Lakla, who is handmaiden to the Shining Ones, and she's accompanied by a humanoid man-frog. And Lakla and Larry only have to look at each other to fall in love, with a love that will last for all eternity. They don't even have to speak any words. When they reach Muria, they find it is ruled by the evil Lagur and his queen Yulara, who is immediately smitten with Larry, of course, and is determined to possess him whatever the cost. I apologise if any of these relationship dynamics are a little bit hard to follow. You see, going back to Lovecraft, although he professed admiration for Merritt's creativity and imagination, he decried him for pandering to the popular audience by including these kind of standard tropes and cliches. I could forgive these plot mechanics myself if there weren't another couple of things that I had a real problem with. And the first of those is the character of Irish-American pilot Larry O'Keefe, who Merritt even acknowledges through the dialogue is just here to do the heroic stuff. Put simply, Larry embodies every Irish cliché that you can imagine. Bigorra. He's charming, he's a hit with the ladies who fall for him in a heartbeat, he's kissed the Blarney Stone, he's always keen to use his fists, and yes, he believes in leprechauns and banshees and takes every opportunity to remind everybody about it. The guy isn't so much a character as a collection of tired stereotypes, which would probably make a real Irishman cringe. I certainly winced quite a great deal during the reading of the book. But the biggest problem I had with the novel was the writing style. And I think the best way to demonstrate that is to read you an excerpt. So if you're sitting comfortably, I'll begin. Forests of tree-high mosses spangled over with blooms of every conceivable shape and colour, cataracts and clusters, avalanches and nets of blossoms in pastels, in dulled metallics, in gorgeous flamboyant hues, some of them phosphorescent and shining like living jewels, some sparkling as though with dust of opals, of sapphires, of rubies and topazes and emeralds, thickets of convolvuli like the trumpets of the 7 archangels of Mara, kings of illusion, which are shaped from the bows of splendours arching his highest heaven, and moss veils like banners of a marching host of Titans, pennons and bannerets of the sunset, gonfalons of the Jinn, webs of fairy, enflammes of elfland, springing up through that polychromatic flood, myriads of pedals. Okay, I think we've had enough, haven't we? Yeah, I found that a little hard to stomach. I think world building is great. I think it's essential when it's a type of fantasy novel like this. But my God, Merritt does go on a bit. I think in these circumstances, moderation is key. And all this voluminous purple prose really tried my patience, I'm afraid. And I'm someone who's read and enjoyed a lot of Gothic literature of a far older vintage than this. To be perfectly honest, I would have DNF'd this book if I wasn't reviewing it for this channel. In the end, it was a real disappointment to me, not just because I've heard of its reputation, but because I enjoyed that first 70-80 pages so much. So sadly, neither of today's books was a good reading experience for me. Have you read either of them? What did you think of them? Are you prepared to defend the moon pool? Please put your comments below. And of course, please remember to like, subscribe and ring that notification bell if you're enjoying the content I'm producing on this channel. But other than to thank you for staying with me to the end of this video, it just remains for me to say, remember, keep searching through those second-hand bookshops and those obscure charity shelves, those market stalls and car boot sales, because remember, there are treasures out there that only you can find.